All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a game review episode. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but I had a viewer reach out and ask to have a game reviewed. So, yeah, happy to be able to do another one. In this case, we will be looking at this game from the side of HitOdessit. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that right. So yeah, let's take some tile counts and jump right in. So their opponent has the first play. So let's see what they do. So they start with 2 blue in the center, and I think in this situation, I'm definitely looking at taking the 2 yellow. I do like having the first player tile in round 2. Other options, I think you could potentially go into like challenging for black, kind of assuming your opponent's going to build the center column here. But yeah, if you don't take the yellow, you just kind of give them this really strong start of 2 yellow. It's going to be 3 blue with the first player tile. So I really like taking the 2 yellow here. One thing to think about though is where to play it, and I think playing it on row 3 could end up being a little bit of a trap, just because there are 5 blues out in this round, and your opponent is going to get at least 3 of them. So at most, you're going to exit the round with 2 blue on row 4, which isn't the end of the world, but when you're building the 4th column, you need to be like really mindful of blues, because you need them for scoring on row 3, you need them for scoring on row 2, you're going to need one for row 1, and of course you have to fill out your row 4. So this is actually something that's been a little like more of a recent thing in my own gameplay, but I've been extra careful about building row 4 if I can't get a lot of blues in round 1. So I might actually opt for row 2 yellow, just to not really get stuck on blues in row 4. And of course, row 2 yellow kind of lets you potentially pivot to any of the 3 center columns, provided that you're willing to not get a row 3, which would be pretty unlikely. But yeah, I think I'd probably just take 2 yellow here for row 2. Okay, so that's the start we see, and the opponent finishes their row 3 blue. So in this situation, I think you're basically looking at white and black. And I think that there's 2 ways you can go here. You can take 2 white and play them on row 4, and you're giving your opponent a group of 2 black, but then you're also going to get a group of 2 black. So you're basically, ending up with at least 2 white, at least 2 black, whereas your opponent will have maybe no white and maybe only 2 black. So while they have the row 3 advantage, you're going to get better lower row development. I think another interesting option is actually to pivot to column 2 and either take 2 white for row 3 or 2 black for row 4. And if you take 2 white for row 3, your opponent could let you have the 1 white and take 2 black and then you take the one white, and then they take another 2 black, and they've got good lower row development, or row 5 development. So this isn't a super easy choice. Additionally, your opponent still needs row 2, and right now red is the most kind of accessible row 2 for them. Now I'm thinking about taking red for row 5, and if that makes any sense. It's actually not bad taking red for row 5. It lets your opponent take 2 yellow, which I actually think would be a mistake potentially. And it lets you get some amount of white and black for rows 3 and row 4. So yeah, this is actually, I think there's a lot of ways you can go with this decision, and nothing stands out to me as like heads and tails above other options. Maybe I like the idea of taking these 2 blacks for row 4, because then what happens is if your opponent takes the 2 whites, these other 2 blacks get grouped, and so you get your row 4 black. I don't hate taking 2 white for row 3 though, because it's pretty awkward to defend this 1 white. The only downside there is your opponent can end up with 4 black. So yeah, I think I'd go 2 black on row 4. But again, I don't dislike 2 white on row 4. I don't dislike 2 black on row 5. Like, I think there's a lot of flexibility here. So yeah, let's see. Cool. Oh, okay. So HitOdessit also kind of, unless that was a misclick, was trying to decide between those 2. So we'll see how this plays out. Okay, so the opponent takes 1 red. So now I'm definitely thinking about taking the whites, and at this point, because we're committed to the center column, we're taking the whites for row 4. And I think that puts us in a pretty nice position to make progress on all of our lower rows. And sure, our opponent will be able to take 2 black, but we can potentially take the last one and still be ahead there. So yeah, so this feels like 2 white on row 4 to me. Okay, so I don't think the black play is necessarily bad, because if our opponent takes the 2 white now, we get to complete row 5. But I do want to emphasize that it is slightly better to complete your column in order, basically, for maximum vertical adjacency. So while I do talk about making progress on lower rows, I think row 4, ideally you complete row 4 before row 5. And so in this situation where we're building the same column as our opponent, it's a little like extra beneficial to be ahead on row 4, because then that's a bonus that we are getting that they are most likely not getting in vertical adjacency. So we'll see what they do. It is a little awkward for them to take the 2 white because it completes our row 5. So we'll see if they decide to do it. Okay, so they're building out the upper rows. So again here, even though it sacrifices our row 5 completion, I still think taking 2 white is a strong play. The other thing is we should be able to get 2 blue for row 3, and then get a row 1 at the very end. So yeah, still taking 2 white here. Trying to think if there's of course other options like taking 1 black, but I don't think it's a guarantee the opponent chooses to block the last black and would just make progress on their own row 4, and then it's going to be kind of hard for us to defend black, and so they'll be able to kind of get the round 2 blacks without problem. So not that we expect too many of them, but yeah, I think I'm still going white row 4. Okay, so this is, I think, a common, I don't want to necessarily say mistake, but we can actually see it in our opponent's building also, which is that players in this like mid-level range really emphasize vertical adjacency in round 1, and it is not that important. There's a couple of videos out there, and probably some posts in the forums as well, that show that like having offsets in round 1 can actually even be beneficial for long-term building. And in this case specifically, where we're taking negatives, having perfect vertical adjacency is actually worse when you are taking negatives. And shout out to Admitted, the World Series of Board Gaming Azul champion for 2024. Congratulations, Admitted. But this is something that he pointed out to me. So the power of vertical adjacency, right? So our opponent is going to get 6 points from these tiles. But when they play, let's say, 1 yellow next round, it's worth 2. And then let's say they play 2 blue next round, that's worth 4. So they're going to get 6 plus 4 is 10. Now, imagine that instead of the red, they have a yellow. So in this round, they'd get 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. But then they play the red next round for 5 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the blue for 4. So they get 9 points next round. And what did we say they got this round? 4. So they get 13 points between rounds 1 and 2 if they were to build with an offset, versus the 6 plus 10. It's 6 plus 6, isn't it? It's 12. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you actually gain a point if you build with an offset. So now, why is it worse to build strictly vertical with negatives? Because the strength of building this strictly vertical is the 6 points that you get in this round. So if you score 6 and then 6 and get 12, that's great. But if you build this 6 this round, but you take, let's say, 6 points in negatives, your next round is only 6 points, versus when you build with a stagger or an offset. We already talked about playing this red gets you 5 points, playing this blue gets you 4 points. You get 9 points in round 2. So when you build perfectly vertical but take negatives, you're actually kind of sacrificing round 2 points because you get more points from having the offset. So this play of red incurs a negative, and it actually may have been better to like end up with a black in row 1 to build with offset in the next round versus taking negatives but having perfect vertical adjacency. So I know that was kind of long-winded, and this probably wasn't the best video to explain this in, since it's a game review and not like a round 1 video, but I just want to highlight that building with like perfect vertical adjacency in round 1 should not be a very high priority of yours. It is much better to like get board development than to have perfect round 1 vertical adjacency. So hopefully that makes sense. If you go and view a lot of like top player games, sometimes their round 1s can be all over the place. Like they'll have a white in row 1 and row 2 blue and, you know, row 3 blue or something. And it's often because they're more focused on getting the most out of being able to play tiles on the board versus like upper row adjacency. So I do think the red play here was a mistake. Like I said, I would have gone 2 white on row 4. Okay, and again, I would just take 2 white on row 4. Okay, and then here, although it is uncomfortable, I think the correct play is 2 blue on row 3. There were 5 blue in this round, so you know there's at least some reasonable chance that we are going to have a very hard time getting 3 blue next round because our opponent can take them for row 2 with adjacency to their row 2 yellow. So even if there's like 4 blues, it might still be hard to get them on row 3. And I don't like being blocked up on row 3 for too long. So I would probably just take the 2 blue for row 3 here. Now, the interesting part of this play, I'm not taking 2 blue, is that it does give our opponent the chance to make a mistake here, which is to play these 2 blues. So the only reason I would opt for taking 1 white is to present this trap to my opponent. And I think a high-level opponent will never play these 2 blue on row 4. But at this level, this opponent might. So we'll see what they do. Okay. So I think this is a mistake, and this is a mistake that should really dictate how we play the rest of our game. So let's see. So this is a bit of an unlucky draw, and I'll talk about why. So the hope here, the reason why this is a mistake, one of the reasons it's a mistake is because there were a lot of blue, and now our opponent is dependent on blue. And that part worked out for us because there's only 2 blue. So we can take 2 blue for row 2, and they'll be stuck. And actually, it kind of worked out for us in that there's not a lot of black, so we can take 2 blue, and then we can also prevent them from finishing row 5 black. So they're going to be stuck on this until the next round. The reason I say it didn't work out is because ideally there would be more white in this round. Because what's going to happen here is that at some point our opponent's going to finish one of these 2 rows, and then they're going to need white. So it would have been great if there were a lot of white that had come out, and white was tied for the least frequent color in the last round. But unfortunately there's only 3 white, so they will have an opportunity to get white tiles later. But had there been a lot of white in this round, then they would really be in trouble, because once they complete these, they're going to need a lot of white and there wouldn't be as much left over. So, but yeah, from a strategy perspective, like, we love to see our opponents tied up like this, where it's going to be hard for them to build a column because they're mismatched. And so we should basically do whatever we can to keep it this way. And for this round, that's going to mean starting with 2 blue, and then taking presumably 1 black after they take 2 black. Obviously, we'll see what they do, but I would guess that they take 2 black. And the thing that's nice about this round is that we can play these yellows and these reds either on row 3, in the case, well, yeah, if we're going to play 2 blue, then we're not going to have row 2 red open. So we don't really have to worry too much about negatives. So that was a lot of talking. Let's see. Yep. So that's good. Yep. So they take the 2 black. Okay. So now we have a decision. And I do think it is important to note what we want to do with this 1 black tile. And I do think taking 1 black is still correct. But I think you want to play it on row 1, because what could end up happening here is basically the whites and the yellows could end up getting grouped, and that could lead to challenges for row 1. So I think, like, we're not in a rush necessarily to finish out this row 5. So I'd rather play with adjacency on row 1 than to get 1 extra tile in row 5. We can look at some other ideas here. Like, I don't think rushing into row 3 red is important. These are not very good points for us. So I don't think that that's a particularly strong play. We could look to finish our row 4 white by playing 1 white, for example. But like I said, I really want my opponent to stay tied up down here, especially because not that many whites came. So we can expect a lot of white in the next round, and we still want our opponent to be really tied up. The other thing to consider is, our opponent wants row 2 red because they can't build with adjacency anywhere else on row 2. So a play like 2 yellow on row 1 maybe is kind of interesting. It gives you the flexibility to still play the reds on row 3 if they get grouped up. And it prevents your opponent from getting this row 2 red at no cost. They at least have to pay like an extra red for it. But I think I'm still going black on row 1 here. Perfect. Okay, so our opponent took the 3 red. Again, we're very flexible in our row 3. So I'm probably just taking whites. Now the question is how to do it. And actually, there's maybe some interesting plays here. So an interesting option, if we look at our opponent's board, like what can they still do? They can play row 2 red. They can play row 2 white, though it's subpar. And then there's up to yellow and white in row 1. So what happens if we just take these 2 reds and throw them away? If we take the 2 reds and throw them away, our opponent can either take 3 reds for row 2, and then we take either 3 white on row 3 or 3 white on row 4, which isn't great. So that's probably, I think that's getting a little too cute maybe. And additionally, actually, yeah, I think you just take 1 white here. So the risk of taking 1 white is that it leaves you open to negatives, right? Because you take 1 white, and then they take 2 red for row 2. And then there's 3 colors left. So, and you only have one spot to put them. So you take like the 4 yellow, they take 2 white for their row 1, and then you're stuck with these 3 reds. So that's the downside, is you take negatives. One way around that is to actually take 2 white on row 4, and then if they take, let's say, the 2 red, you can take the 3 red, and there will be, nope, just 2 colors left. So you can't even do that. So I don't know that you can really avoid negatives here and still keep things clean. So I think probably just taking 1 white here is fairly good. Okay, so we'll see the 2 white route play out. Interesting. Yeah, so here I think you just take 3 reds for row 3. They take 2 reds and you take 1 white. I think our opponent potentially should have just taken 2 reds there. I'm not sure about the yellow play. Because now we get off with not too many negatives. Okay, so this is a tie game. Okay, so much like the last round, we have run into some tough luck here, which is, again, when our opponent is tied up and cannot play whites, no whites are coming out. So pretty unfortunate. Additionally, the blues all being in groups of 2 means that we're going to at least overpay by 1 to finish row 3 blue. So yeah, just not like some pretty rough tile luck. So let's see what our opponent does. Generally in this round, what we're looking at, we want to get at least 1 white or 1 yellow to prevent our opponent from getting this row 3 yellow. Completing black would be nice, but it looks like it might be tough because they have a nice spot for row 1 black and then a nice spot for row 5 black. And then we should be able to get row 2 red, no problem. There's just nothing they're going to do to stop reds, so we don't necessarily need to like make that a quick priority. Okay, so here I would be grabbing this one yellow and securing the first player tile so that we can control white in the next round. Again, like white is going to become the critical color in the next 2 rounds. Yeah, so I think competing for black here is a little... there's not a lot of pressure on us to finish this row 5 black. It is good defending, but really our opponent like kind of only needs 1 black. So if I'm the opponent right now, I'm taking these 2 blue and controlling the next round, recognizing that white is going to come in spades and that I'm going to need it to finish a column. So I would have taken control of the next round. I think that's of pretty critical importance. And if the opponent takes 1 black, I would be, yeah, so they're going to do the blue play. Okay, so at this point, trying to get all 4 of these blues in the center is part of the plan. With that in mind, I might take a yellow from this factory to put these 2 blues in. Taking a black is okay, but the problem is then our opponent takes a black and then we're faced with these 3 yellows, and we actually don't want these yellows to group up because we don't have a good spot for them. There's only 5 blues left, so we basically have to at least get 2 blues in this spot. We can't leave row 3 blue empty this round, because then we need 4 blues of the 5 left. So we can't play row 3 yellow, in my opinion. So I'm looking at taking a yellow off the board right now because it's like a good time to do it. There's no other pressing need for us. Like I said, the red is uncontestable for them. So yeah, we might pay a little extra for row 2 red, but it's definitely going to happen. So I would just be taking a yellow off the board. And I think taking a yellow that puts these blues in the center is strong because then we can take these 2, the 2 reds and get the group of 4 that we want to finish out row 3. Yeah, so we're going to see this play out. Presumably, I assume the opponent will take black. Oh, interesting. Okay, so here I'm definitely taking the yellow. This blocking their row 5 is not super critical. And actually, this brings up an interesting... Yeah, I think I like taking the yellow. It makes this row 4 blue only worth 1 point instead of at least 3, if not 4. And the black, like, they're going to be... There's still 9 blacks left. This isn't... it's actually in conflict with their row 1. So I think you take a yellow, presumably they take a black, and then you take the 2 red and get your group of 4 blues. If you take the yellow and they take blues, then you can just take the black, and you won't get all of your row 3, but you'll still get 2 of them. So let's see what happens. Yeah, so this just feels like And now look at the like situation that you're in with your top row. If you take white here, they take blue. You have to choose between putting 2 blues here, or putting 4 reds here. Like it's just going to get ugly really quickly. And yeah, so now they're going to have the opportunity to defend this row 3 blue. And what do, right? Like I said earlier in the round, this was like non-negotiable for this round because there's only 5 blues left. Whoops. So this was the make it or break it round, I think, because now, yeah, our opponent has control of the board. There's a ton of whites for them, so they can just slam dunk this this row 4, these 3 whites on row 4. They're guaranteed to get it, and we have no blue options. So just some like situational awareness in that last round of more of the macro strategy perspective of how important blues were to our board, and also how important the first player tile was. Imagine, like, even if we didn't score a lot last round, which like we actually didn't score a lot much anyway, the impact of being able to like play 3 blues on row, or I'm sorry, play 3 white on row 3 with adjacency to our row 3 blue, maybe get 2 whites, or like start building row 5 white. We would have been in much better shape this round with the first player tile and this blue finished. And again, like there were 9 blacks left. Oh, I haven't done the tile counts for this round. So there were 9 blacks left. So we went to great lengths to defend this row 5 black, sacrificing the first player tile, sacrificing row 3 blue, taking extra negatives at the end with those reds. And like our opponent has 3 options to fill this, and to fill this, and an option to fill this. So, you know, what did we really gain by defending those blacks? Not much. And in fact, without row 3 finished, like the vertical adjacency that we got for finishing our row 5 black was bad. We only got 2 points for it. So now I think this would be a very hard game to come back from, but we should still analyze it, obviously. Now, so we're down by 6, and we need blues to finish our column. So I think first and foremost, like the first player tile is important. There's only 4 blues left. If we want any chance of getting a column, we need to have control in the next round. Are there any other viable column options? Not really. So I think taking 1 yellow for row 1 here is the start. The other thing that I'm looking at in this round is, because we're down by 6, we need to, and our opponent's probably going to score, that should always trigger the thought, like, can I get negatives on my opponent? And in this round, the answer is yes with yellows. So our opponent cannot play yellows. So a fundamental part of our strategy this round should be trying to get those yellows to our opponent. And most likely, that will mean not playing row 3 yellow. it's worth 5 points to us, which is not bad. But if we can get 5 negatives on our opponent, that's -8 at least. If they take some other negatives, we're looking at -11 or -14. So that should be a kind of key thought. Okay, so our opponent takes a black. Now, okay, so if we've concluded that we're probably not going to play row 3 yellow, the only real things we're thinking about here are what we do on row 2 and maybe trying to get row 3 white, which is a little bit risky because our opponent could just take it. But it's a thought. So what do we want to do here? I think we make a play for row 2, and the question is, which play do we make? There's 4 blacks and 5 whites, so I think it's reasonable to want to try to stick our opponent with having to still get blacks next round. So I think we probably want to just take 2 black on row 2. And if our opponent takes... Okay, so this is a little bit of getting into the end of round sequencing. If we take 2 black and our opponent takes row 2 white, which is a somewhat reasonable assumption, then if we take either the red tile or the blue tile, there will be 4 colors. I'm sorry. If we take, there will only be 3 colors. We can't make that work. Okay. Yeah, never mind with the end of round sequencing. I was thinking of a way to try to force the yellows on them, but wasn't going to work out. But yeah, I think let's start with row 2 black. I don't think white is that bad, so I think it was a close call. And I kind of expect the opponent will take 2 black now. It leaves them with 2 options for row 4 white, and it leaves them with 2 options for row 1 black, so they're sitting pretty. Okay, and now going back to what we talked about earlier, we want to dump these yellows on our opponent. So I think the right play here is to take either one of these blacks or one of these whites. And what that will do is put our opponent in a situation to either take the last black, in which case, like if we take a black and they take a black, there will be 4 colors in the middle, and then we take whichever of black or white we didn't take first. I'm getting kind of convoluted, and then they're going to get stuck with these yellows. So I think let's see, you could take, if you take 1 white and they take 1 white to finish this out, then you take the 2 black on row 4 maybe, or you throw them away, and then they don't get a row 1. So that's one thing. So that's if you take a white. If you take a black, and then they take a white, then this doesn't work as well. I'm trying to think of which tile they will prioritize more. And maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the answer is like you can go either way here. But I think because we've left them with row 2 white open and presumably row 1 white open, I think it's better to take a white here, because then they're trying to squeeze, of the 5 whites, they're going to need as many as possible for their point scoring. So in the event that you take a white and they don't take the last white, you can really stick them. So I think taking 1 white here is correct, as opposed to taking these 3 yellows. And now see, like, we can't prevent them from, in the world that we took 1 white and they took the last white, then we could prevent row 1 black. And if we took 1 white and they took a black, then we take the last white and we prevent row 4 white. So by taking these 3 yellows, we guaranteed their ability to get both row 4 white and row 1 black, whereas we could have prevented one of these things from happening until next round. So although these yellows look good for 5 points, our opponent actually would have taken more than -5 points if we were able to dump the yellows on them, and we would have prevented one of these other row completions, either row 1 or row 4. So now I think, you're trying to make them pay for this row 1 black. So I'm looking at taking something that will group these 2 blacks together, and give them the last pick. So it's probably just 1 yellow. You could even play a yellow on row 4, and then take this next yellow after they take row 2 black. So taking this white does sort of the same thing. I think we could have gotten away with 1 less negative, perhaps. Okay, so yeah, down by 18, and this draw makes it basically impossible for us to get row 3 blue. We would have needed a group of 2 blues to guarantee it. So yeah, there's not much that can be done in this game. Interestingly enough, maybe the correct play here is row 3 white. So take 2 white, and prevent them from being able to score on both of these rows. The reason to do that is, like, we know we can't get row 3 blue. Our opponent will just take 2 blues at some point, and they have such a big lead of 18 points that they can comfortably afford to do that. So okay, I mean, row 5, I think, yeah, not the worst idea. But I think row 3 would have been better because our blacks are going to row 2, and now we don't have an outlet for reds. Yep, so just row 1. I'm probably taking a yellow from the middle here. I mean, there's just not, yeah. There's really nothing to be done at this point. And yeah, we're gonna eat these red negatives, unfortunately. Oh, so this is a mistake by our opponent. So our opponent could have played that yellow and given us -6. Instead, they are playing these blues for 2 points, and we will take -1. So it could have been net gain of 6 for them. Instead, it will be a net gain of 3. So always do that math. These reds are not, I mean, maybe they're just playing them for fun because they have a big lead, but okay, so I think the main topics in this game were macro strategy ideas. And I actually didn't confirm with HitOdessit if they do tile counts, but tile counts were kind of a critical part of this, or at least awareness that like blue was running really low, and it was critical in round 3 to get that row 3 blue. And then the other thing we saw was understanding the value of the first player tile based on the macro situation, which was that there had been so few whites into round 3 that controlling round 4 was going to be critical, because our opponent was finally unblocked and was ready to start taking white tiles in row 4 or row 5. And then the last thing was the defensive play in round 3 around the blacks. So understanding when you need to be defensive and when you don't. I think this was a case of giving up a lot for the sake of delaying our opponent 1 round when there were plenty of blacks left. It's one thing to defend when there's not a lot of a color left and you're going to really strain your opponent, but the defending that we did in round 3 didn't put any strain on our opponent. They didn't need blacks that round. They had other adjacency options in row 1. Delaying their row 5 wasn't a big deal. So I think those would be the highlights. Hopefully this video was helpful. 52-minute recording for a single game, but got pretty in-depth into some good topics, I think. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.